Welcome to Dadograms. Recently I just went back to Kansas where I heard a funny story that I want to start out with. Apparently somebody I know every week routinely passes up the gas station right next to their house, drives 30 miles one way in order to fill up their tank and save 10 cents a gallon at Walmart. Can you imagine that? Now if that makes sense to you, if you think that's a good deal, pay attention to what I'm talking about in this datagram because I think you're going to learn an awful lot about wasting time and money. I'm Jason M. Garrett, and as many of you probably know, I was a Navy pilot. And there was one thing they drilled into us in flight school and beyond, and that was about fuel management. In fact, it was rumored as we were going through flight school that if an instructor ever caught us pulled over alongside the road because we'd ran our car out of gas, that was the end of our flight career. We'd get kicked right out of the program because if we couldn't manage fuel in our own car, we had no business in the world learning how to fly a Navy aircraft. But despite how well trained we are in fuel management, it surprises me how very few people actually know anything about it. One of the things I always like to do when I see somebody who steps out of a car, somebody who I know, I always like to ask them, what kind of fuel mileage do you get? You know, how many miles per gallon does that car of yours get? And I laugh every time at the startled look on their face as they realize they don't know what I'm talking about, much less able to give me the answer. So let's start off first by talking about that, miles per gallon. And I'm just going to tell you very simply, a very easy way for you to calculate that so that you actually know it. Now don't worry, this isn't going to bog you down with a bunch of math. It's a simple process. Now for most of you out there, you probably have some new high-tech car who's got all the computer systems. You can go through your menus and you can find out what kind of miles per gallon your car actually gets. But for some of you who don't know how to calculate it yourself, please pay attention. And for a lot of you who drive cars that don't have that ability, this is going to help you out finding out that answer. Here's the simplest way to do it. The next time you go to the gas station, fill your tank completely full. When you get in the car to drive away, go to your trip odometer. It's usually on the dash and it's often just a button. Push the button, it'll go to 0, and that's all you got to do. You filled your gas tank all the way up, and now you're going to go for a drive with your trip odometer starting out at 0. Then after a week or two, when it comes time to actually get gas again, you're going to come back in, you're going to fill up the tank all the way full again, and then you're going to take note of how many gallons it took to fill your tank. Then when you get in your car, take note of the amount of mileage that it took to actually use that amount of gas. That's what your trip odometer should be reading. So I'll give you a quick example. Let's say on your odometer that you drove 357 miles. And then you look at how much gas you got and you filled up your tank with 17.6 gallons. If you take that 357 miles and divide that by 17.6 gallons, you'll see that you got 20.28 miles per gallon. Make sense? That's easy math, and that's all the math we're going to do here. But if you're inexperienced with this kind of thing, you're probably starting to ask yourself, is 20.28 miles per gallon good, or is that bad? So let's talk about that next. Now I'm going to talk about all of this from my perspective, because I have 3 different cars sitting out in the driveway right now, and each one of them gets different gas mileage. So they're great examples that we can work through here. The first vehicle is a 2017 Ram. It's not a car, it's a truck. This particular vehicle gets on average 17 miles per gallon. The next is my wife's 2020 Honda Pilot. And if I'm being very generous, I will say that it gets 22 miles per gallon. And then the car that I love so much that I gave to my daughter is a 2020 Prius. And that awesome machine gets 55 plus miles to the gallon. Now, here's my general guideline when it comes to cars. I have always been of the belief that if you drive a car that gets less than 25 miles per gallon, that's bad. That's what you call a gas guzzler, and that thing costs you a lot of money. If you're driving back and forth to work with a car that gets less than 25 miles per gallon, there are some changes you can make, and probably should, that will really save you a lot of money, like getting something more fuel efficient. Now, if you drive a vehicle that gets between 25 and 35 miles per gallon, that's kind of okay, right? You might want to call that one a fuel sipper instead of a gas guzzler. Now, if you're driving a vehicle that gets between 35 and 45 miles per gallon, that's great. That's a fuel miser, and that's something you definitely want to keep driving. But the holy grail, at least at this time, is a gas-powered vehicle that gets 45 to 55 miles per gallon, or even more. That is absolutely fantastic. That's what I would call a mileage master. Now remember, I'm assuming that each one of these vehicles is only driving around one person, probably back and forth to work or to school. But if they are going to have more than one passenger in the vehicle, that actually changes the equation. Let's take a look at how. Again, we're going to use my vehicles as an example here. The Prius that we drive can carry comfortably 4 adults. The Honda can actually carry 7, and the Ram can carry 5. If they are driving their max capacity, you have to take the miles per gallon on one hand, and you have to take the number of passengers on the other hand, and you multiply them together to get a new number. That new number is a PMPG, or passenger miles per gallon. So, I know this might be new to a lot of you. So let's consider my vehicles again. For the Prius with 4 passengers in it, we now are driving 220 passenger miles per gallon. Not bad. For the Honda, it's 154 passenger miles per gallon. And for the Ram, maxed out with 5 people driving in it, it would be 85 passenger miles per gallon. So this can at least help you feel less guilty about driving a gas guzzler if you know that you're actually hauling your entire family around at the same time. For our Prius, we do pretty good with that one, and it kind of balances out because my 2 kids, both in high school right now, ride together, and they are getting about 110 passenger miles per gallon. My wife and I apparently are driving gas guzzlers. My wife drives hers probably somewhere around for about three days of the week, and I might drive mine once or twice. However, our vehicles may only be driving one person around, but they are oftentimes doing more than just that, which brings us to something else to consider. My truck, for instance, doesn't often just carry around people, it also carries around stuff. That open bed can be used to haul a bunch of stuff. So let's think about it from that perspective. Let's say that we need to drive back and forth to a storage unit that we have 5 miles away in order to load up with holiday decorations for the house. I could do that in 1 trip with the Ram, I could do that in 2 trips with the Honda, or I could do it in 5, maybe 6 or 7 trips with the Prius. So you can kind of work through the math on yourself to figure out which would be the most financially efficient. However, that brings into something else that you have to consider when thinking through these kind of things. How do you value your time? For instance, if I take the truck, the Ram over there, I can fill up everything in 1 trip. The whole entire evolution might take a single hour of my time. But if I was to do the Prius, it's going to take 5 or 6 trips. Same distance, same drive speed. Therefore, it might take me 4 or 5 hours in a Prius to do the same job. So, even if the Prius was more economical, what is truly more worth it? My thoughts are, take the Ram even if it's more expensive because I can save a heck of a lot of time doing it. So these are other things that we have to consider. Okay, so enough with that. Now I want to talk to you about one more weird thing about fuel mileage that you probably don't know. Whenever you calculate fuel mileage, it's the average fuel mileage for the entire use of that tank of gas that you just refilled. But did you know that there are various times when you're driving where you can get extremely good gas mileage, and there are other times that you're driving in which you are getting horrible gas mileage? If you can figure out how to optimize one and get rid of the other, all of a sudden you can improve the miles per gallon that you actually get with your vehicle. Let's consider the 3 absolutely worst things you can do in your vehicle that suck down gas faster than anything else. First is driving at maximums. Let's think about driving at maximum speed. If you were able to do that and you're driving down the road at 130 miles an hour, pedal to the metal, you're revving up your engine to try to push it through a lot of air as fast as you possibly can. This is extremely inefficient and literally just sucks money right out of your gas tank. The other thing, and we hear this all the time, is jackrabbit starts. So if you're going to rapidly accelerate, that's another way to dramatically reduce how much fuel efficiency you're having. The next one, the one that's absolutely the worst of all, driving fast is one thing. Fast acceleration is another. The absolute worst of the worst, though, is not moving at all. Just sitting there stopped. Now, whether you're stopped at a stoplight or you've just dropped somebody off in the parking lot and you're sitting there at idle to keep the air conditioner running, whatever you're doing, you're actually not traveling at all while you're still sitting there burning up fuel. And therefore, you're getting 0 miles per gallon, but you're still burning through fuel. Now, yes, you're sipping on fuel, and it can take you perhaps an entire day sitting there idle before you actually run out, but still, you've gone nowhere. This absolutely destroys your miles per gallon, so consider that. But there are speeds that you can drive that help out tremendously. There are times, based on the aerodynamics of our I was going to say aircraft, but of our vehicles and the engine's RPMs, you can actually find a sweet spot where you get really good gas mileage. For my Ram, I can actually drive at 50 miles an hour and I can get well over 30 miles per gallon. The only problem with that, though, is where can I drive forever at 50 miles per hour without stopping up traffic or really irritating a lot of people, right? So I know that that is the best speed for me, but I can't drive at that speed very often. Now, if I go faster than 50 miles an hour or slower than 50 miles per hour, my fuel mileage goes to hell, all right? It goes down really quickly. Now, for each of you to find the best speed for your car, miles per gallon wise, what you will have to do is find, if you've got one of the computerized dashes that can tell you this, you're going to want to find your instant mile per gallon gauge or reading. And as you're driving along at even miles an hour, like 20 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, take a look at what that is actually doing. What kind of mileage are you getting? You're going to find in there somewhere a certain speed that will give you incredible miles per gallon. Why is this important? For no other reason, perhaps, than that if you are really tight on gas, like you're almost on empty and you've got to get somewhere quick, if you can go that speed, you're going to make more range or go farther on the amount of gas that you have remaining, and that can really help out. That's kind of a max range concept for aircraft that we use in the Navy. All right, so enough of that. Let's go ahead and answer the question that a lot of you probably were curious about in the first place. Did the person who was driving 30 miles one way in order to fill up your tank actually make a good decision, or was it a bad decision? All right, so here it is. As I said, I recently was back in Kansas and I learned a family member of mine was actually doing this. They passed up the gas station literally right next door to the house and drove 30 miles one way to save 10 cents on gas and then drive 30 miles back. So was this a good move or not? Well, let's do the quick calculation to find out. Let's consider they're driving a truck just like mine, because he does in fact have a big truck like mine. Mine gets 17 miles to the gallon, and let's say he was going to have to fill it up with 19 gallons of fuel, almost an entire 20-gallon tank. Now, the average price of a gallon of gas in Kansas today is $2.47. So to fill it up with 19 gallons right next door to his house, he would pay $46.93 total, all right? But if he went to Walmart and he saved 10 cents a gallon, he'd save $1.90, right? That tank of gas would actually cost $45.03 to fill up. But remember, while he saved $1.90 there, he still drove 30 miles out of his way and back in order to be able to pull it off. So we have to consider the 60 miles round trip that he used. If we take 60 miles and divide that by 17 miles per hour, what the Ram would get in this case, you would end up burning 3.5 gallons of gasoline to go there and back. And that comes out to about $8.36, which if you take $8.36, subtract $1.90 that he saved, lo and behold, the entire experience of getting gas at a cheaper rate ended up costing him $6.49. It was a colossal waste of money and his time. He didn't go to Walmart to shop or anything like that. He just went to go get gas, and he went alone. So all of those things really do play a factor into it. And if he's doing this once a week, well, you do the math. What is $6.49 times 52 weeks? He's losing quite a bit. And I'm sure if he thought about it, he would rather keep that money in his own pocket. I see this kind of faulty thinking all the time. And the first time I ever actually saw it was in flight school. A friend of mine was absolutely obsessed with using a coupon that he had to save 50 cents off on a can of cat food. He drove from store to store to store all day long trying to find that brand of cat food so that he could use that coupon. I tried to explain all this to him back then, and he simply could not understand what I was trying to say. And needless to say, he didn't make it through flight school, unfortunately. Well, maybe fortunately. All right. So that's it for this datagram. I know it's somewhat unusual, but it's something that really bothers me when people make mistakes like this, and I'm always trying to help each and every one of you learn how to win in life. So if you liked it, go ahead and drop a comment or give me a thumbs up, and I look forward to seeing you, or I guess you seeing me, on the next Dadogram.